love the Duffer brothers. They have given this generation their Star Wars. They have given this generation their Star Wars. But you never fight the Dungeon Master, do you?
They want you to think it's Vecna.
But what is the real bad guy? The Shadow is the Dungeon Master. I'm still waiting for the aliens to drop.
So what if Vecna isn't the real villain of Stranger Things? I sat down with Jason T. Davis to discuss a theory that turns the whole show upside down, where the true enemy isn't a monster, but the Dungeon Master itself.
You've seen Stranger Things, right?
Yes, I just finished watching what they've released of the 5th season.
They introduced the Creel character, Henry Creel. Henry Creel is a character that popped up out of nowhere from a videotape in a mirror in Stranger Things 4. But there's a theatrical production in Broadway that is a prequel to Stranger Things. And in it, they get into how Henry Creel ended up in the Upside Down. Now, before I go further, I admire the writers, and I love the Duffer brothers. They have given this generation their Star Wars. Stranger Things is for the young group.
Sure.
And it's beautiful. The stage play creates the Henry Creel character, and then it refutes anything anyone said about the Montauk Project or was theorizing up until 3.
Oh, really?
The thing to remember about the play is a lot of the Stranger Things is about the occult.
Yeah.
Fosse wrote a movie that was kind of like about his life and being a dance choreographer on Broadway. All that jazz. At the end of the movie, Fosse dies. And then what happens is he's in a bed dying, and then he is given the script written by himself of his life by the director who is himself. Now, this is actually tied into the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the Egyptian concepts of what happens to you when you die, to where basically there's a director called Milty.
Yeah.
This director wrote a script called The Life of Milty. And then you are a character in this production he wrote that you are playing, but you are the director and the writer playing the role that you wrote for you. And the Egyptians felt that people did that to perfect themselves in the other world, that they were creating a game for themselves of sorts, like multiple choice or choose your own adventure.
Okay.
So now we get to Creel, but there's something about role-playing games that I noticed about the Duffer Brothers and Stranger Things, 4 and 5. Have you ever played White Wolf?
No.
What White Wolf did is they create a game, a role-playing game called Mage the Awakening, followed by a kind of second edition by White Wolf called Mage the Ascension.
Okay.
In their wizard role-playing system is a lot of actual magic, because they researched what they could find in books and whatnot. And one of the things that they encountered was a phenomenon known as the theater of the mind. Now, here's where it gets really freaking crazy.
Okay.
Now, you get this in actual reports of people who've done DMT trips or astral travel, LSD, and tripping and going into, like, hallucinogenic states. But there's this place called the theater of the mind where if you wander too far from this world away from your body, Mage the Ascension, the second edition, gets into this when it deals with astral travel. But this is based on a real-life thing that ties itself to the Egyptian Book of the Dead. The idea is that if you astral traveled and wandered into the theater of the mind, you would end up seeing a stage production of your life. And people who report going into the theater of the mind or the theater of reality say that it's like you broke away from your own TV show and now you're watching it, but you're watching it from the audience, but you're aware of the production. So now we get to Stranger Things, the Duffer Brothers, and Henry Creel. What is the main bad guy in Stranger Things? Vecna is a character based on a D&D game that they think is Henry Creel. But what is the real bad guy? If you were going to translate H.P. Lovecraft and make a reference to The Thing, and make a reference to the invasion of the Body Snatchers, but also make a reference to how werewolf lycanthropy seems to be something you can get from being bitten or something, how vampirism appears to be something you can catch. What would be the closest thing a mindless abomination Cthulhu deity in our world? A disease.
A disease, oh yeah.
In the Bible, demons start out as, like 30-foot tall people with 6 fingers in each hand, and they got 2 rows of teeth. By the New Testament, demons are people who are insane. They're people who have magical powers, or they're people who get a disease, and then they seem to have other physical powers, like amazing feats of strength or whatnot. The Duffer brothers are saying that the shadow is a disease. It is a disease. And remember, everybody in the town got this disease. People who are possessed by the shadow, their blood changes. And so here's what happened. In John Carpenter's The Thing never communicates its plans. The Thing is mindlessly pretending to be a human until it goes crazy and kills everybody and replicates. And it is able to pretend to be its host, right? The disease got Will a long time ago.
Hold up, is he saying the shadow is a symptom of a bad case of the flu?
Next, what does a dungeon master do? What a dungeon master is he summons a character and you fight that character.
Okay.
But you never fight the dungeon master, do you? The shadow is the dungeon master because he learned how to be a dungeon master from Will. When you think of the shadow, there is no individual to the shadow. Like you and I, we're individuals. I am. You are self-aware. You don't want anybody to control you. You are you.
Right.
So whenever you're dealing with anybody who's been infected by the shadow or copied by it, they've lost their individuality and now they are the shadow. What the shadow did is it kept getting beat. So it learned. It pops Henry Creel into Eleven's mind when she's watching videotapes, and it tells her, hey, here's this character that existed. Well, that's what a storyteller does, or a dungeon master, or a referee. They create a villain, and they go, hey, Milty, you find out about this necromancer that's always existed. But your character's like, wait a minute, I never heard of this fool. But you in your heart know, I just made this up yesterday because now you're 5th level and you're about to fight a necromancer. So the shadow invented Henry Creel. It invented this character, and it's going, hey, the children in Stranger Things 1, 2, and 3 have powers. But the children are really psychologically abusive to the point of murder in 4, where they're willing to kill poor 11. And then I finally realized what's going on. 11 goes to high school. The disease has now infected everybody. And everybody in the high school is kind of being really mean to 11. And this seems to continue, where 11 is constantly being taunted and teased. But then you begin to notice something. None of 11's friends ever step forward and go after the people taunting and teasing 11. In 4, the high school girls make fun of her until she screams and puts her hands out and goes, ah, like she wants to kill them, but she has no powers. The people at the roller rink tease her and go after her, but none of her friends ever go, hey, why are you being mean to 11? Because it's not happening. It's all in her head. The shadow is gaslighting her. The shadow is gaslighting everyone to break them up, to make sure they're not stuck together. And then the shadow said, hey, here's Vecna, go over there. But the shadow is really a disease that lived in the house that infected people and made them sick. And then the shadow projects from the house, but it's really just a disease. And what the government was studying about 11 is they noticed that even though everybody else got the disease and seemed to be mind controlled, 11 got the disease, had powers, but was individual. She was I am.
What stood out to me early on in this conversation was Jason's idea that the shadow wasn't evil in the traditional sense. It behaves more like a disease. It spreads, it learns, and it doesn't care who it's using.
If you then look at Stranger Things like a virus that has learned a new trick and is now making up this Henry Creel character for you to fight, where it gets really crazy is because the virus can go back and forth in time, because of the concept of a Tesseract, it can implant itself in the past now. It can say, oh, a Vecna was there back in the day, as long as it goes from memory. Now, here's what's funny. You know the dad who keeps making the frowny face with the big thick glasses? Now, have you noticed the little kid that they created who showed up in 5, who's wearing the colored stripes? He's constantly playing with a Tesseract, and he's wearing glasses and has a similar build. That's the father, because the father went back in time and is fighting the shadow by using time travel, because that's how a Tesseract works. when you watch Stranger Things, you can believe Vecna is real. Fine, Vecna is real, because remember, the kids say Vecna is real. But now it's so funny when you watch Stranger Things 5 because the Shadow is being very careful to make sure no one ever comes near it to be a threat anymore. It's making them run around in a maze looking for Vecna. It's causing the military to show up in this place and just sort of wait. It causes Will to get openly possessed by the Shadow, but everyone's cool with that. And then from there, it's a big clue at the end of Stranger Things 5, the last one, when Vecna doesn't kill Will. There's probably a chance that Vecna was only being seen by Will, or that Vecna was an illusion in the first place. But it's how now the Shadow is able to project itself, and anyone with the disease can then project it or be infected by it. And that's what's going on in Stranger Things.
Think about the moment that Hopper hallucinated that Vecna was in the room with them, and then he accidentally shot Elle through the sleep deprivation tank.
Now, what I don't know is the whole time travel arc thing, because it's related to A Wrinkle in Time. And that seems to be the Shadow using time travel to create a universe to where nobody can go to it, that it's like a copy of our universe, but it thinks like a disease. That's why when Billy asks the Shadow, "What do you want? What are you doing?" the Shadow goes, "To build." Well, that's what a disease wants. A disease wants to build. It wants to replicate. If any disease, and there are billions of diseases and viruses on Earth, if any disease truly had its way, every living thing on Earth would have that disease and become that disease. That's what a disease wants. There's also something that's really screwed up about the Shadow. It seems to be that like electricity awakens it. In Stranger Things 3, Will is watching one of the Day of the Dead or the Dawn of the Dead Romero zombie films. He's then looking at a pale, sickly, kind of evil girl with a shaved head in a room full of boxes. You know, a cube. Brenner's symbol is the cube. Brenner's symbol, though, is the black cube. And the black cube in the occult is really f***ed up. Car salesmen use it. Will is looking at this woman who's in a cage, and the woman turns and looks at the screen. Now, that woman is the Shadow. That woman is the evil memory of 11, and the evil 11 that is still in Will's brain.
Say what? How did I never catch this?
The girl then looks at something that exists in the film screen. They don't show you what she's looking at. But luckily, I'm crazy enough to find it out, and I figured it out. And what it is in the movie, the woman is looking at an image of pumpkins rotting black in a field. When Will looks at the rotted pumpkin patch, he remembers what happened to him, and the memory triggers the Shadow to then possess him. And Will gets more and more possessed as it goes on. That's why Will is trying to distract his friends from going out and doing things by making them stay in a place and play D&D. But when you look at Will, he's acting crazy. Will is being controlling. He's like screaming and yelling at him, going, "No, stay and play D&D," like he's the screaming geek. And it's because that's the Shadow. But the Shadow got better at being a referee. And now the Shadow is making everybody run around in a maze, looking for something. The Shadow is diverting people by making them go after Vecna. And who cares if you kill Vecna? He'll just make another Vecna. Because there is no Vecna. The Shadow is whoever the heck it's possessed. But whoever is possessed by the Shadow is the Shadow.
Wait, does that mean I'm the Shadow? I am the Shadow now.
In The Stand, Randall Flagg and the Crimson King are like, they are these entities that could be individuals. And so if you look at Henry Creel as kind of being like Nyarlathotep or the Yellow King, where you do have these human people that are that then kind of show up that represent a demonic entity. In A Wrinkle in Time, you find out that A Wrinkle in Time is connected to Stephen King's It series because it appears to be the same being. A being, this entity from another dimension who's evil and has, red eyes and all that, and makes its people become a collective. That's A Wrinkle in Time.
At this point, I asked Jason if he thinks that there's a connection between the Red King here and the Talisman, and he goes deep into how Stephen King influences Stranger Things.
The talisman deals with the Crimson King too. This is strange, but I'll make a connection. Stephen King grew up watching Gumby. Well, Stranger Things references Stephen King a lot. It's just what it does. Uh, in the drawing of the three, the gunslinger sees three rectangles in front of him, and then he goes into each one. Remember that trick where Gumby would go into a book? Now, notice how when Gunslinger goes into a book, the genre changes completely book to book. And he's dragging characters out of books and bringing them into other books because that's the Stephen King universe. The Stephen King universe is a whole bunch of books, but his characters literally go into other books and in some cases see a book and travel into the other book. We haven't really seen that with Stranger Things, but we've seen different dimensions. When you look at Stranger Things 5, they always seem to create a new dimension. And there's this dimension, which is like the dimension of dreams. In the Kabbalah, it's Yesod. It's also the moon. The dimension of dreams, it's where Max is, but you'll notice there's a maze. There's 26 dimensions in string theory. There's 13 up here, and there's 13 down here. In the Kabbalah, there's this thing called the Sephiroth. And the Sephiroth is our dimension, and then the rest of them are up here, which correspond to 13 up atop. And then there's the clip-off, which is like hell, basically. And those are the 13 dimensions down below, those dimensions. So the problem in our world is we have a sphere called Makluth. That's everything you see around you. But a long time ago, because of freaking fallen angels, Yesod, which should have been up here, came down, because 1/3 of them fell. So our dimension has this 1/3 problem, but then there's another dimension called Lilith. Now, Lilith is the dimension of the bioelectrical. If you're a living being, that's Lilith. That's the devil, bioelectricity. It opens and closes when things die and are born. And believe it or not, it is referred to in the occult as the Matrix. Because the Matrix is really very, very occult. The Matrix is about ghosts and demons. And that's where I think Max is Max is in the Matrix.
Yo, somebody call Neo and come get her out of there.
Which is between Lilith, which is kind of like Hades, and then our dimension. And she's hiding in this kind of pocket because she's in a coma. So she's kind of able to stay there, whereas Creel, if he goes into that maze, he can get lost and never come out. He doesn't have a living body. The concept of a maze, though, is the Matrix, and it's very, very like Hades and our dimension, and you know what the Bible talks about and what Greek mythology says. So,
as we now know, this is pretty much exactly what's going on. She tells them that you have to follow the memories back to the very first moment that Vecna has of you. Possibly, if Jason's correct, maybe that's the moment that you were infected to find out how you can get out of that matrix.
Well, it's almost like when she tries to go to her body, her brain, because of the music and because of love, because love is a big motivating factor in keeping people alive in Stranger Things, oftentimes it is the combination of a memory and love. That's what saved Will. So when he was possessed, Will's mom brought him back through a combination of memories and love. The concept of memories being used, of course, something straight out of Blade Runner. And this is where I brought up White Wolf again. When Eddie and everybody goes to Hades in Stranger Things 4, that dimension that they're in looks a lot like the dimension that wraiths have to go to in White Wolf, which is Hades. And those creatures that keep killing people by draining their blood, they look like a creature from D&D called a Shrike. They also look like a Greek mythological creature called an Erinyes. Now, in Greek mythology, when you died, a lot of things could actually kill you. It wasn't just, death with the big scythe. One thing that could kill you was just Mercury. If Hermes wanted to, he could just show up and take your soul away. But it's considered an honor to have Hermes personally collect you. Then there's Death, and Death was a dude with a sword and wings, and he sometimes is a little boy. There's Hades. Hades could just take you directly if he was really in the mood. And then there are these things called the Erinyes or the Furies. And what the Furies are is when people have f***ed up and done evil, the Furies would come at them and get them. But there were also the Aryanes, which were basically spirits, flying winged spirits of murder. When you died because of combat or because of a killer killing you, you were killed by an Aryanes. That's what those flying things are when they're running around in Stranger Things 4. But here's where it gets funny. Is really any horror movie where people are being killed, they're being killed by Aryanesses. Because of the way Greek mythology has its rules, it insists that if you're killed by some sort of violence, an Aryaness got you, even if you're on the battlefield and a sword got you. And in the Iliad, it describes how while heroes are fighting against each other for either Troy or for whoever's fighting Troy in the Iliad, the gods are by their side, almost like with baseball bats, knocking Aryanes away to keep them from killing their favorite hero. So in Stranger Things 4, that's what those things kind of are. Is they're kind of like the Aryanes, but they're also like these things that exist in Hades in the Wraith series by White Wolf. So it's like all these references at once, but also in Dungeons and Dragons, when you go to the ethereal realm or the Veil of Shadows, there are horrible things there too. But that dimension, by the time we get to Stranger Things 5, we built the guy, the Shadow has built that wall. And I know what the wall represents in like H.P. Lovecraft, but I don't know what the heck they're going to do with that wall. That is a pretty good mystery.
Here I mentioned that the quarantine is happening only in Hawkins and that the quarantine zone was set up in the real world. We now know that this was a bridge from our world to the Void planet.
Well, when you're looking at Vecna in Stranger Things 4, Vecna is roaming around the town and he's choosing people, right? Now, when Vecna possesses people, first, they see clocks. So because Vecna is possessing them, they are seeing what Vecna sees because they're possessed by Vecna. Then Vecna projects an illusion. Again, the shadow can project illusions and make you lose your mind. It did it to Eleven. It did it to Billy. When the shadow fired off a mental blast from Will, it caused Billy to see his parents and have his parents drive him into a berserk rage. So everybody has this disease, but what the shadow goes for is a person who feels guilty. What happened is the little boy was a sociopath, Creel. The little boy was a serial killer because let's face it, the 80s and the 70s were all about serial killers. You and I can name like 5 serial killers as if they were celebrities.
Son of Sam, 44 caliber killer, Killer Clown, Freeway Killer, Hillside Strangler, Night Stalker, Golden State Killer, Original Night Stalker, Vasilia Ransacker, Scorecard Killer, the BTK Killer, Sunday Morning Slasher, the Butcher Baker, the Angel of Death.
But what about serial killers now? Not much fame. You don't hear about the Boston Strangler or the Son of Sam. But in the 80s, in Stranger Things, you got to deal with serial killers because also in Stephen King's books, every once in a while you get a sociopath. There's that really scary kid from It who gets like the slugs on him that drink his blood. That guy is a stone cold sociopath. And I realized, the little boy was a serial killer, a sociopath. He goes into the house and he gets possessed by the evil disease in the house. But then when it possesses him, he's perfect because he has no mercy. So he gets possessed and now he has freaking powers. And when Vecna looks for people, though, he finds people who are guilty. He possesses them, and then because they are not sociopaths, they die. Now, have you noticed how when Vecna killed people, what happened to their bodies? Think of it yourself as a detective. Okay, you and I are detectives. We walk into the room, we find the body. What was the emotional state of the person who died? Fear. They're terrified. Remember The Ring? They're absolutely horrified, okay? Next, their bones are broken. Now imagine having every one of your bones broken one at a time for you to feel the agony of it. Next, these people are afraid and they know they're going to die. So they have the fear of death, the absolute horror of fear, but also it seems like he keeps their souls afterwards and milks them. Well, if you've ever looked at David Lynch films, in David Lynch films, a lot of those demons are doing horrible things to each other because they're in the psychic realm, that he calls it, whether it's the marketplace or you want to call it the Karmaloka. Uh, when a demon or an evil magician eats your pain in David Lynch films is known as gorgonzola. But in a cosmology that the occult, there was a guy that invented it, the term. He's not Rudolf Steiner, he's another occultist, but the term is called Loosh. And Loosh is the occult term for the psychic pain you feel when something can be torturing you. And that's what Vecna is feasting on. Just like David Lynch cosmology, he's feasting on Loosh. He's feasting on pain, the fear. He's feasting on that Loosh. And that Loosh is a bioelectricity.
When Jason starts talking about Loosh or bioelectric electricity, what immediately comes to my mind is Freddy Krueger. Freddy doesn't just kill people, he feeds on their fear. The terror itself is the fuel.
So that's why I think that that big flesh gate is it's finally keeping 11 out. It's learned that 11 will always close the gate. So it created a weird wall of souls from the dead people it's been eating and leaving there until now it has this weird wall. But also how the disease can transmorgify and control flesh somehow. The entities drinking blood for the shadow are probably the biomatter of the people that it stole. And because the people that it stole don't come from that dimension, it's able to like modify their flesh. But that's what the thing did anyways. Plus the tentacles. Lots of tentacles, man.
Yeah.
I mean, can you count the tentacles? What the frack,
Yeah,
dude?
they're everywhere.
Well, my theory is Cthulhu has tentacles, and Azathoth is a seething mass of limbs or tentacles too, if I remember correctly. Like Azathoth is definitely dreadful. Another H.P. Lovecraft deity, Shub-Niggurath, is described as an entity with a massive amount of limbs. And of course, if you just look at him, you'll go nuts. And remember too, there was a Cult of Cthulhu role-playing game that was around back then. So the Shadow has learned about role-playing games. The Shadow understands Dungeons and Dragons, and the Shadow knows now how to play the Dungeon Master. And the Shadow is playing the Dungeon Master. I also noticed that in Stranger Things 3, when the human beings attack the young lady, their blood is clearly not normal anymore. They've been mind controlled, and their blood is now like this black blood. And in the Stranger Things play, where they talk about that, they make it clear that people controlled by the Shadow have had their blood replaced. Well, the Bible tells us the blood is the life. And a lot of what I noticed about when people were killed in Stranger Things 4 is it's like their blood's no longer draining out of their body, but they seem dehydrated. Well, the dehydration, I guess, is from the fact they lost all their blood. But when they look at the bodies in Stranger Things, no one ever says they lost all their blood, so I don't know what's going on. I really do feel that 4 and 5 are a reboot, and 3 finishes, and then 4, by creating Henry Creel, and having Henry Creel show up from a videotape that she is shown where he literally keeps popping out of her head. You'll notice in Stranger Things 4, when Henry Creel appears, he literally pops out of her head. Like he is an idea, or a tulpa. When 11 is playing chess, she's playing chess with Henry Creel for a reason. That is her ultimate enemy, but remember, if the Shadow absorbs somebody, the Shadow is that person.
Wait, L is the Shadow?
When you're dealing with people who really work for a corporation and maybe they're a bit crazy, they've lost their themness, and now they are that corporation. And a person, will tell you, I'm sorry, man, it's just business. Well, Henry Creel, he may seem to have a personality, much like the Thing, but ultimately, it's just a mask. The Thing in control is really the Shadow, which is a super predator that wants to kill people and spread, and it's a disease, and it doesn't really care about anybody. So I feel like 11, yeah, she's talking to Henry Creel, but when people are watching a stage play that tells us about this Henry Creel character, that's the shadow projecting a hallucination into everyone's minds, going, see, here's this villain. It was always this villain. Go after this villain. And you go, oh, well, I'll go get Henry Creel. I'll go get Vecna. But it can keep conjuring up more villains for you to fight, like a dungeon master. Now the shadow is a dungeon master. Everyone's running around a dungeon. Everyone's chasing after these things. They feel really special, but the shadow has put them in a maze. It's put them in a box or a cube.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of manipulation is. Even the symbol in the occult for our whole fallen realm that the Bible claims we're in is a box, because it's trying to say that people are stuck in a box, which is why in Christianity the cross is a box that has been unfolded, which then looks like a lowercase t. You're getting out of the horrible cube. There's two things I don't understand about Stranger Things, though. I'm going to tell you right now, it's two things I don't get. Where's the extraterrestrials? Brother Milty, brethren, my fellow movie enthusiast, you and I could name a dozen badass motherfracking movies from the 80s that were about aliens. E.T., Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Aliens.
Let's see, you got E.T., Aliens, Predator, The Thing, They Live, The Abyss, Cocoon, Enemy Mine, Mac and Me.
So there's no E.T., there's no aliens. Escape from Witch Mountain is basically that these children are UFO human hybrids, which is why they have powers. At one point, the children fight each other because one has been mind controlled. Aha! Now, here's where it gets funny. What was the government trying to do to Russian spies in Stranger Things 1? Kill them. What does Vecna do? Remote views people and kills them. Now, here's what I noticed, man. H.P. Lovecraft mythology, there's a person called the Dark Man, who is Nyarlathotep. He goes by a lot of names. He's both a deity, but he's also a possessed human. Did you notice how the general in Stranger Things 4, the evil general, is so single-minded? He talks like this, almost like he's mind-controlled. I wonder if he had the disease, got possessed by the disease, and now what you really are looking at that general doing is acting like a person possessed who's trying to make sure that something happens. But it felt like the general was not a real human being. Now, it was a reference to Candyman, but that guy, he was really scary, and I thought, oh, what if the Thing possessed a general? I don't know, just something I thought of, like maybe he's possessed. And that's what's scary about the shadow, is when the shadow possesses people, they act different, but the one clue we have when the shadow possesses people is they have black blood and they appear to be rotting. Like it's killing them. The general didn't appear to have black blood or was rotting. But I do know the government really wanted to get the power of the shadow, where it has the power of Vecna to find people and eat them. It wants that. Stranger Things tried to get away from conspiracy theories, which I respect. You know, some of the conspiracy theories were really unattractive to anyone who was remotely involved in Hollywood or politics. But you can't have all that rainbow imagery without making a reference to Project Rainbow. Project Rainbow, it's the idea that because of the Philadelphia experiment, they were now going into different dimensions through different time leaps and traveling through time. Now, here's why I have to admit I get it blurred between the Montech Project, the Philadelphia Experiment, Stranger Things, Project Rainbow, and Project Stargate. But when you get into the Montauk Project, this is what I think Stranger Things 5 is gonna make a reference to. What happened was, in the Philadelphia Experiment, they opened a time tunnel. When that ship came out, because it kind of left our space-time and then came back in, and as the Earth was rotating, it simply came in as the Earth rotated, and boom. But now there was a tunnel through space-time that, for some weird reason, it started in that year, but it didn't close until the future, I think in the
Okay.
80s. Okay. Now, during that time, what the government did is the US government was talking to the US government in the 80s, and they started to do this back and forth with technology, according to the conspiracy theory. The future 80s would send back technology to the past, and then the past would improve the technology and then keep going into the future.
Okay.
And then because the future would improve technology in the past, the technology would then improve in the future, and they kept doing this for a while until the gate began to close. But until then, they tried to create new tunnels, new wrinkles in time, by sending people who were psychic and having the people open these tunnels in time. But sometimes people disappeared. Sometimes they came back crazy. Sometimes they created a whole new timeline. But ultimately, when people went too far in time, they encountered this thing where uh, everything was kind of like pulverized radioactive destruction, and all they could see was a big gold horse.
Okay.
That's why on the Montauk Project, they show you this big gold horse. And it's almost like reality had said, no, you're no longer allowed to see in the future. And that's what I'm waiting for in Stranger Things 5, is that if they're traveling through time, something is going to autocorrect, but the Project Rainbow and Project MK Ultra and all that also referred to psychic people being used to create time tunnels. Now, my problem is I have no idea ultimately what Brenner was trying to do in the lab.
It's almost like it was a wormhole or something.
I was thinking that he was studying children who had psychic powers that they had kidnapped from people, but by the end of Stranger Things 4, I realized no. Look at the children, for instance. How are the children dressed?
They're all in hospital gowns.
Because they're sick
Yeah.
with a disease.
Okay.
There's only two logical reasons why you put a little kid in a hospital gown. One is, well, the second is, I mean, if someone's really up, yes, but the second is because they're sick, because they have a disease. And that's what I realized, oh, shoot. A person who looks at Stranger Things could think all of these children were all just kind of children who were innocent. But if you look at it another way, it's 11 versus a whole bunch of children who are all possessed and were a unimind, which is why they all try to kill her. And then later, it's always a group of people trying to kill 11 because the shadow keeps trying to kill her.
This portion of the discussion reminded me of Stephen King's The Institute, a novel about kids being held in a lab and studied.
I'm still waiting for the aliens to drop, you know? I'm still waiting for UFOs. I'm still waiting for ET. Oh, another one. Where's our Flight of the Navigator reference, man? We got no UFOs or aliens in Stranger Things.
Now we kind of do. That stone?
I don't know why. And I keep expecting it, but why should they? You know? It's just bizarre that that never happens. And if it happened in 5, it would be completely logical, is what I'm saying.
So now that we've all seen it, I think it's safe to say it's aliens, or at least something like that panspermia theory.
I keep thinking that what it was is the sheriff's daughter is 11, right? But they didn't want him to know that. So you notice how in 4 they tell you we can alter your memories and we can change your memories. I bet they used that process on the sheriff to make him think his daughter died. His daughter didn't die. They took his daughter away and replaced it with a memory of his daughter dying so he'd never look for 11. And the reason he has such an affinity for 11, it's his long-lost daughter, and on some subconscious way, he senses it. You would know your own kid.
Now, this theory is interesting because if you look at the first episode of the first season, Joyce Byers hears what she thinks is Will breathing on the phone, and she asks Hopper, "Wouldn't you know your own daughter?"
Vecna was also like, that reminded me of Molasar. Because in the last one, I made reference to Molasar and how, like, Vecna, when he's first appeared, is very much like Molasar from the Keep. What I'm also confused by, when the little girl who was kidnapped is in the house, right? She's talking to a dude who looks like Henry Creel. But I noticed something about it. The shadow has absorbed the good characters who died. In season 2, you had the really cool dude who was played by the dude who was the Hobbit in Lord of the Rings, Sam. Sam gets killed, but Sam's a nice guy.
Eddie Munson.
Yeah, Eddie
And
Munson.
then
Eddie Munson gets
and
killed.
then Nancy Wheeler's friend in the beginning, in the first one even.
Okay, Barbara.
That's right.
Now notice how Barbara had the red glasses. Notice how the weird Henry Creel talking to the little girl is like a mishmash of all the nice characters. If you took all the nice characters from Stranger Things 1 to 4 and mushed them together, you would have this nice person. Now, here's where we get into the Bible again. I'm sorry, atheist. In the Bible, there's the spirit and the soul. The spirit is your bioelectricity, the devil. And so as a result, it's always going to be evil because just like Jesus said, when Satan fell, he fell as lightning. That's why then when they say to Jesus in the Bible, hey, Jesus, we've been driving out things in your name. He goes, I saw Satan fall as lightning. What he's saying is Satan is electricity. And in Stranger Things, they're telling you that these people who are absorbed, that's their spirit and their soul, where your soul is your real you, your God you that is nice. It's benevolent, it's good. That's your Grossbonanji in voodoo. You have the T-Bonanji, which is like a copy of you, and then you have your Grossbonanji. Now, The Serpent and the Rainbow was an 80s, 90s film, a horror film that dealt with voodoo. And I'm wondering how much Stranger Things is aware of The Serpent and the Rainbow. If you want to see a badass movie by Wes Craven, in The Serpent and the Rainbow and in voodoo, when a Boker zombifies you, he steals your T-Bonanji. And so then you're basically your body is sort of connected to this copy of you that he controls. But he could never control your Grossbonanji, your guardian angel, who you really are, because you go back to God. But yeah, Will having powers, that's just me saying that Will's possessed. And that's why Vecna didn't kill him. Oh, there's a mystery I noticed that I can't answer for you, but it's really kicking my ass. I can tell you about it. Dustin's in the graveyard. He remembers Eddie Munson. Well, we've learned that the shadow, if you remember a memory, can come at you through your memory, right? It copied Eddie Munson. So, homeboy, Dustin, I love Dustin. He's my favorite character. He really is. I feel like Dustin is all of us in a weird way. Dustin, he's the heart. He has the most empathy, okay? And how much would it hurt if Dustin died? Now, what if Dustin turned evil? Ugh. So here's what I noticed, brother man. Will remembers an image, sees the weird evil 11. There's a blast of electricity from Russia. He feels his neck. Now Will's possessed. Okay. Dustin remembers Eddie Munson because he's at Eddie Munson's grave. Suddenly he looks and he sees images of people, the people who are going to beat him up. The camera pans around him. There's nobody there. Dustin remembers Eddie Munson. The camera spins and the bullies are suddenly at all angles of him. Now the bullies beat his ass, right? To be fair, in Stephen King books, bullies beat people's asses. Stephen King bullies are not like bullies you and I encountered, my friend. The Stephen King bullies are sociopaths. They're serial killers. I mean, it's like, whoa. These three bullies beat Dustin. And the last we see of Dustin is Dustin being beat to death because they're kicking him when he's down. Okay, so either A, when people get possessed, their nose bleed, right? I wonder if Dustin has powers. Okay, so let's play Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, we're gonna image through. Back in the day, a lot of what they did with the gate program is they taught us to imagine when you're playing like video games. Like we'd play Mummy's Tomb, we'd play Asylum, we'd play Pharaoh's Tomb. If you ever look up those old school, Zork, we'd play Zork. And a lot of what they taught us to do is they'd go, okay, what do you think will happen next? All right, what else could happen? Choose Your Own Adventure is trying to teach you to image through. So now you and I are going to image through with Dustin because it's Choose Your Own Adventure. Okay, so Dustin's getting beat to death, right? Now you and I are the directors and the writers. Just as Dustin beats to death, cut. Now you and I are the writer and director. Hey Milty, what if he got powers and suddenly went and did a psychic blast and knocked everyone down? What would happen? They kill him, and now there's a copy of him spying on everybody, knowing all their maneuvers. Now, in the thing copies you and pretends to be you to the bitter end. When it finally flips, there's no conversation, it flips. The good news is, in Stranger Things, when the thing becomes you, it's pretty clear that you're not you when it possesses you. When Billy's possessed, he can pretend to be nice. Oh, he can pretend to be nice. So the shadow can pretend to be nice. The shadow can pretend to be you. It can pretend to be Dustin. Okay, so here's my question.
Okay.
In Stranger Things 4, this is what happens when people die. First, they see a clock. Then, they see things that make them feel guilty, which are memories of something that happened in the past. That's a clue as to why the shadow kills those people. It wants to travel to the past through their memories because it can. Because then it's time traveling. That's why it needs 12 kids like hands and a clock. So Dustin sees images. He feels guilty because Eddie Munson died for him. Check. He sees images. Okay. Nose bleeding. Check. So what if Dustin at that point was mind blasted by Vecna and killed, and now we have a copy of Dustin? But here's the problem. When Vecna does that, it breaks their limbs, and it causes them to be and Dustin doesn't look like that. So we got two ideas, but according to what we see, the second idea, that Dustin has been completely possessed. However, when Billy was possessed, but his blood was black, and Dustin's blood is not black. So either A, Dustin was possessed by Vecna and devoured. I don't know. B, Dustin was possessed by Vecna. Maybe, but no black blood. Now, Dustin doesn't want to talk about what happened.
To me, I mean,
Well,
I'm just looking at it from like surface level, but they make it seem like
okay.
it's emotions, right? Like he doesn't want to deal with those emotions.
Now, if you and I are playing detectives, why wouldn't somebody talk about what happened to him? Murder.
Okay.
Maybe Dustin killed these people and he doesn't want people to know he killed people. But at the same time, if Dustin had powers, he would instantly tell his friends, look at me, I got powers. I just knocked out those bullies. Now, here's another thing, Milty. These bullies appear right before they beat up Dustin a lot. Have you seen these bullies since then?
Yeah, recently.
If
So
the bullies show
what you were
up,
saying about the bullies, to me, like I'm thinking, so it shows them he's in the daytime. He's at Eddie Munson. Yeah, he's at his grave, and he's grieving. And then all of a sudden, the guys from the high school show up and they beat him.
and then the camera pans away from him getting beat. Later he appears. We don't know what happened.
Don't know what happened exactly. So I also was thinking when you're saying about him getting beat up before, like, you know, like it's a time loop.
What if he knows something about the future and he has to keep it a secret so people will keep doing what they're doing, because if he tells them about the future, it'll alter events, which is kind of a problem in Terminator. But something's going on where he's not talking. And I felt like we didn't see those bullies, but if we saw the bullies afterwards, I'm so sorry. But that's crazy too, that these bullies aren't going, wow, we really beat that dude to death, or the bullies are going, wow, Dustin beat us. That's what's so curious, is there's a hole there, and we don't know what Dustin did. So I guess that you can flip a coin and go either A, Dustin killed them all. I don't imagine Dustin killing those people. He doesn't seem to have kung fu superpowers. But what was in Dustin's bag? Dustin had a bag. So what if the bullies are beating him? He opens up the bag and whips out a firearm and blows their asses away.
Dustin's got a gun.
He wouldn't want to tell his friends that, would he? And so I was wondering about that it was probably just, freaking guns. And it would also explain why Dustin doesn't want to talk about what happened. He doesn't want to tell his friends. He just freaking shot some bullies dead. But the problem is you have to dispose of the bodies. I know where I would dispose of bodies. Dustin knows where all the gates are. Shoot your bullies dead, drop their bodies off in fucking Hades, and let the shadow eat them. The cops are never going to find the bullies' bodies after they've been killed by Dustin. And if they do, well, that's what that plane does. It throws people through stargates and eats them. And that's why Dustin ain't talking. He killed those bullies. Now, I noticed that Dustin looks like the little pudgy kid from the Monster Squad. And the little pudgy kid from the Monster Squad, well, that little kid at one point whips out a shotgun and blows away the creature from the Black Lagoon. So if Dustin pulls out a gun and blows people away, that's kind of how the 80s rolled. So we have Dustin having psychic powers and knocking them all dead, hence the bloody nose. Okay. Dustin whips out a gun and Dirty Harry's them. Man, that's the 80s, Holmes. Dustin suddenly beat them up.
You may be thinking, man, I didn't see anything like this in the show, and you'd be right. But this did make me wonder. Those guys would have just killed him, really. I mean, they were beating him pretty good. So why didn't they? And where were they for the rest of the season?
But something happened to Dustin, and they're not telling us, and that's a big mystery for 5. I mean, you and I played DM now. We've gone through these different images that we can run through, but I can't tell you for certain. It's just a lot of fun to talk about and think of. What are your theories about how Stranger Things 5 ends?
Yeah, so I was looking at Will, and I had a different take on it. But for me,
okay,
the take was that he didn't realize how powerful he is and that he could take control over the shadow.
Oh, there's also something else. 11 has powers, but 11 is not controlled by the shadow. Right. 11 is the adversary of the shadow. That could be the same for Will.
Could be. But I feel like Will. So like whenever his mom was fighting the Demogorgon, and the Demogorgon was like backing away in fear, but Will was afraid because Will was afraid that the Demogorgon was going to kill his mom. So that fear separated them from each other. And so like I'm thinking like once he learns if he can control their thoughts, then maybe he can help win the game.
You just answered something too, where a lot of people complained that it didn't make sense why the Demogorgon was getting stabbed by the bottle. It does make sense that what you just said was that he was controlling it because he was like mirroring it somehow.
Yeah. It was scared because he was scared. That's what I gathered. And then at the end of the episode that they left us on that cliffhanger, he just like kind of takes God mode.
Well, you have to remember, why is it that 11 can telekinesis things? According to quantum physics and string theory and relativity, everything is a hologram. If you look up the high-level people who work with CERN and string theory, they'll tell you reality is a simulation. When Buddha was under the Bodhi tree, Buddha saw that everything was Maya. Now, Maya in Theravadan Buddhism is both evil and illusion. When you look at the world around you, you're looking at a hologram. But there's a space, don't worry, I'm not casting a spell, I'm a Christian. There's a space about right here in front of your nose face where when you're looking at the world, your brain cannot see that. So if you look up how your mind works, what your brain does is it creates a hologram for you that is about right there so that you kind of know what's there, but it's really not something that's there. It's a combination of your memory of what's there, but also a calculation of what's there. That is very creepy because it's basically saying not as only is life a big hologram, but when you are looking at life, a lot of this is a hologram that you created in your brain to compensate that your eyeballs can't like focus right. But here's where it gets worse. Is anyone who's into psychology or just biology or anybody will tell you that a lot of reality as you go through it is an image in your mind that's upside down, no less. That you see everything upside down and then your brain turns it back over.
Wait a second, the upside down is in your mind?
So your reality, as much as you go, that's my reality, first it's an illusion. So part of it is a hologram of your own brain, just including from its memories. But it's also an image in your head that then has to be flipped upside down. So really everything is just a hologram. You live in a big simulation. What 11 is doing is she looks at something and she's looking at a hologram and she's simply manipulating the hologram. Now you think it's telekinesis, but she manipulates what she sees because she's just manipulating the hologram of what she sees. And that kind of explains on a deep physical level because from there, She has like telepathy. She has the ability to locate people. Like she was able to locate her friends using her astral powers or whatever the heck they called it when she goes on the upside down, which is the infinite darkness. When she was tracking down the Russian spy for the first time, it was that infinite darkness. Later, Vecna searches through people through infinite darkness, but he sees windows in their minds because they have his disease. So that's why 11 is controlling everything. She's controlling everything because of magic. It's just that she's choosing to do something very limited with it. Remember, when she killed all those poor people in the first season, their eyes would bleed. When Vecna kills people, their eyes bleed. I don't know what 11 is doing to kill those people um, unless it was some sort of like electromagnetic pulse that melted their brains or whatever. But we don't know what is killing them or what they see. And then later, victims of Vecna kind of look like that. Now, I wonder if Dustin did what 11 did. He suddenly goes, and then boom, there's a mental blast and they frickin' die. Now, Dustin did it by accident. 11, with her mental blast, when she killed all those people with guns, she did it on purpose, but she did a mental blast. What if Dustin freaked out? He was about to die, so boom, they all died. But there's still a mystery there. I don't know what happened to Dustin, but I can see how all these people's powers work.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That's really interesting. And I was looking at something the other day. I wish I had saved it, but they were comparing, all these different characters to the different series that they kind of were based out of. It was like each one of them does have some type of a power, whether it's supernatural or whether it's a character trait or something, but they all have like their own part of the game.
Oh, you're right, because one character has a lot of hit points.
Mike Wheeler, Paladin, Dustin Henderson, Bard, Lucas Sinclair, Ranger, Will Byers, Sorcerer.
Well, here's something I noticed that was fascinating, but I don't know what it means. You're watching Stranger Things 4. Look at the POV shot whenever Eddie Munson is talking to somebody. The POV shot is really, really tall. When it switches to Eddie Munson's POV, he is towering over people. Now, that one kid who always gets beat up, who was the fighter that was fighting the Demogorgon in the very first Stranger Things, he doesn't even put up a fight to Eddie Munson. Eddie Munson grabs him and shoves him against a wall and has the weapon ready. Eddie Munson is about to scrag his ass, and this kid can't even fight. And Eddie Munson's POV in that is that of a giant. He is massive. So I don't know what the heck Eddie Munson is in the cosmology unless he's a DM. Because a DM is the most powerful thing that you can never fight. So I don't know. Because you're right, every one of them is a character, but Eddie Munson must be something. He's really powerful, though.
Yeah. No, and that's too that because like he was the DM for the Hellfire Club, so it would make sense for that symbology to mean something.
It's also that he was kind of a bard because he tells stories and plays music. But the fact that these people, they all are, like you said, they all are characters. Each one of them, like one seems to be a ranger, the other one seems to be a like the one who uses guns. That could be like a wizard of sorts. But they all kind of become that way, and then 11 is see, here's what's kooky about D&D. What people forget about Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons did have psychic powers. So 11 fits into D&D as just being a person with psychic powers. But psychic powers in D&D sucked because it worked both ways. That things that had psychic powers that could normally never bother anybody, if they sensed you, they'd come after you. And 11 kind of has that problem too. But she as a psionic person actually fits into the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons cosmology. Is all the whatever that you want to call it.
Pause. I realize we've been talking about Dungeons and Dragons a lot in this episode, and I just want to be clear with everybody and don't want to mislead you. I don't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons except what my friends have told me. I've never played a game of it in my life, but if you guys want to educate me in the comments, go for it. It's Ethan Hawke's daughter's name in it. She's kind of like a thief. The one that works, or the one that at the radio station.
Oh yeah.
So the
one who works at the radio station.
So they go into the to the hospital and they steal stuff, and she's the one that instigates all that. And
you're right about that. And In 4, there was a lot of doubles, there was a lot of twinning. In 5, I noticed a lot of synthesis. In a lot of 80s films, including late 70s films, one film is The Never-Ending Story. There's a concept in films about ascendance being the equivalent of victory. Ascension is victory. And what it is in real life, the person who bullied you in high school, you can't take revenge, you know, because then you'd be in prison.
Right.
You know, you can get in his face. You could, but the funny thing is, if you got in his face now and said, "Hey, you bullied me in high school," everybody will go get over it. You know, that was in high school. That it's too late. What happens to you really is that you ascend, that you get so, like, you get into another level where you are a father, you have a house, you can hire a lawyer, you can call the cops. There's nothing this guy can do. You've ascended. And so in Stranger Things, I'm looking for a lot of that ascension, but there's also the concept of synthesis, where in a lot of Gnostic concepts, and Gnosticism is evil, but Hollywood follows it a lot. You have a dark side and a light side, but in the end, what causes the banishment of the shadow is the realization of your dark side. In Japanese mythology, there's this thing called an akiryu, and what it is if you hate somebody, but you don't take this hatred out on them, your akiryu is like an evil aspect of your spirit that you create an image. And this doppelganger, which is in David Lynch, which is in Theosophy, will then attack that person. What causes the akiryu to go away is when the person who created the akiryu is shown it and realizes that's them, and then it's banished, basically. I've noticed in Stranger Things 5, people are confronting their dark side. They're confronting what their problems are, and they're getting rid of their doppelganger by synthesizing it. And it was really cool to watch that over and over again in 5, where people had to come to realizations to ascend and awaken and become better people. The Never-Ending Story. Atreyu looks at the mirror and sees a little boy reading a book. What is Atreyu?
Atreyu is the little boy.
Atreyu suddenly realizes he is a hologram, and the little boy realizes that Atreyu is him once Atreyu grows up a little and is able to have adventures. And that's where you begin to realize the Never-Ending Story is kind of like that. That every time somebody reads that book, they're part of the Never-Ending Story. They're in the book, I guess.
It's a never-ending story. That makes, I love that. That's one of my favorite movies.
When you're looking at Stranger Things, they now have this weird dream realm that is being created by the shadow. And it's trying to trap people, but I don't know, like, when it traps the little girl, when it abducts people with the doppelganger, and it traps the little girl, that's a big Greek reference, too. If you remember the Hades and how Hades got his wife. Hades abducted his bride, who was a goddess or something. Well, the doppelganger abducting the little girl is kind of like Hades abducting the little girl. And, or not the doppelganger, I'm sorry, the Demogorgon. Well, going back to Demogorgon, Demogorgon is a two-headed being, a two-headed demon in Dungeons and Dragons. And what I'm confused by is they always call it Demogorgon, but it doesn't have two heads. And you begin to realize that there's sort of a rule to Stranger Things, that when the kids say something is something, they're kind of wrong. Okay, now I cannot remember the name of it, but there's something that I noticed in the Fiend Folio. It is a type of monster that is really awful, that is a tree. I wish I could remember the name, but I will send screenshots of it to you afterwards. I just need to find it. It's in my book over there. Now this thing, this tree was excuse my language, was horrible. This is what the tree did, okay? It was a big evil fracking tree, and if you got too close to it, and inhaled the spores from it, you got mind controlled by the tree and came closer. Then the roots would grab you, and then your body would drop, and then the tree would slowly be able to consume the body. However, the body is still alive. So if people came near the tree, what the tree could do in the Fiend Folio from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is animate the body. The body could cast spells. The body could trick you, and the body could pretend to be like, "Hey, come over here. There's some treasure," to lure you closer. And then the plant just kept killing everybody.
So this is giving me Dreamcatcher vibes. And what was the disease in the green Dreamcatcher? You know, like that was an alien.
And there you go. The shadow is either an alien from another dimension, which could make sense, or I feel like that when the girl was in the infinite blackness, she sees the Russian spy, and then later, and then she's seeing the Russian spy, then she hears something behind her, and it's the Demogorgon. Well, a Demogorgon has two heads. The Demogorgon kind of looks like the little girl. Now, if you've read my Stranger Things posts on my website that go on and on and on to the point of where you want to slap me around, I keep pointing out that the little girl and the Demogorgon looked alike. Even when she banished it and it was reaching out to her, they're mirrors of each other. So everything after that is just that there's this tulpa. Well, I wonder if the way that the disease manifested in the real world is when the little girl screamed, she opened a gate, and the disease then manifested in the telepathic world. Now imagine you were rabies, but suddenly you existed in the upside down, and you're rabies. Well, what is rabies going to do? Rabies is going to possess people, make them all screwed up and get violent and foam at the mouth. But if you were to talk to rabies and go, "What's your problem?" Rabies would go, "Ah!" and just keep like making everybody diseased and angry and frickin' dead and afraid of water where the frick it goes. And I keep thinking that since there's no aliens and there's no demon gods or gods in Stranger Things, all you can have is a disease. And just as your mind can go into this other astral realm, what if a disease accidentally went into the astral realm? It'd be like a god. It'd be a big disease, and it possesses people because, bingo. Well, the thing is just a disease, and you said it yourself. You pegged it. The thing is a disease, but it's an extraterrestrial. So what if the shadow, I guess, is an extraterrestrial? That's our equivalent of an ET.
Or ultra-terrestrial, which is essentially the same.
Yeah. Well, when you look at an ant colony is really just one entity. And also in a lot of 80s horror films, like Village of the Damned or Invaders from Mars, you have mind control and mass mind control. And I noticed in Stranger Things 3, they had a lot of mind control. I'm going to run a thing on my website where I talk about, hey, maybe the Shadow is playing Dungeon Master and created Henry Creel to get us to pursue him. But also, when you look at it, when the Duffer brothers created Stranger Things 1, they had no idea it would go to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. And so when I saw 4 and I saw 3, 4 had a lot of symbolism in it that in some cases I just looked at and said, okay, they're referencing something. But some of the things they reference, when you look at, you go, well, that existed in 80s films. Like, for instance, they're definitely referencing The Breakfast Club, right? Now, what is Jason referencing in Stranger Things 4? The jock dude.
Oh, like Emilio Estevez's character in The Breakfast Club, yeah.
And do you remember Vision Quest?
I never saw that one.
Vision Quest is about Matthew Modine, who plays a wrestler. So Jason is that character. Jason is good with a microphone. Jason is clearly Christian. Jason clearly identifies the demon when the demon grabs the poor kid. It's just that he thinks Eddie Munson is a demon. Well, when you look at 80s film...
I was thinking about Max's brother. Max's brother is who
Oh,
reminded
Max's
me
brother.
of A Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
You're absolutely right. The Jason character from Stranger Things 4 is also a reference to Jason Voorhees. But in 80s films, there's this thing that they did where the evil person in an 80s film is sometimes a jock, but sometimes it's a rich, entitled prick, usually played by John Spader. Um, or Jason Spader. Is it Jason Spader or
It's
John
Jason
Spader? I screw
Spader.
up his
Yeah.
name. Jason Spader. Oh,
Yeah.
Jason. Another freaking Jason. So Jason Spader. Sometimes he's the rich jerk who's evil, but then they have the jock. In Vision Quest, the jock is evil. In a lot of movies, like one of my favorite movies, it's Some Kind of Wonderful. It's been done by the same guy who did 16 Candles. I think it is Some Kind of Wonderful. The bad guy in that film is a rich dude who's entitled. Well, that's what in 80s films, they had this hierarchy of individuals in high school, social stratification. The evil ones were the rich entitled dudes. The second ones in line were the bullies, who were jocks. But the third in line during the 60s and 70s, if you ever see Animal House or you ever watch Gorp or Meatballs, are military people, ROTC.
Oh yeah, like Chet
But
from Weird Science.
Weird Science. And hey, in Weird Science, that woman is just a tulpa.
Okay, yeah.
She's Lilith. Yeah, she's Lilith, but she's a tulpa. Um, However, there's something about that one. Well, that's a different thing. Because you notice in the end, she causes them to ascend, to awaken. See, what I find interesting about Weird Science is they summon a woman, and if she wanted to, she could fill all their carnal pleasures and do things. But instead, she does something odd. She makes them
Yeah.
ascend.
It's hilarious to
She
me
forces them to.
that they summoned this beautiful woman that they could do anything they want to with. The first thing that they do when she asks them what they want to do, they take a shower with their clothes on.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And it comes down to in Jungian psychology. Now, Jungian psychology is older than this film. You can look it up. There's a book called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And a lot of films are based on warriors or based on male archetypes and Jungian psychology. Their problem is they are boys. Um, a boy fantasizes about a woman, but a woman to a boy is a mother or a teacher or someone in control. Um, the boy has no idea how to have sex. Well, they're boys. They summoned a woman, but they wanted her to be intelligent. They wanted an intelligent woman, to their credit. And so when she appears, she goes, "Okay, these people are boys. They need to become better people." So she's not really demonic. She's more like a big angel, like a fairy godmother. And so I wonder if the Henry Creel image is kind of like that good image of goodness that still exists, maybe. Like that goodness that the shadow copied, and the goodness existed just as a counterbalance to the evil, and the goodness may as well be like an angel or something.
I don't trust him. And it looks like for good reason too when you see what he did. Maybe we'll find out more in the upcoming series they have planned.
The problem is when the shadow copies people who are copies of the shadow will be evil. We saw that in The Thing. Nobody copied by The Thing was nice. That is a problem. Also in AD&D, a lot of the consequences of psionic powers, aside from the fact that they were always a bad news for your character, is mind control. That the person who wins the psychic war effectively mind controls you and can make you do anything. And there is no coming back from it because it's psychic. There's also concepts of like the destruction of the soul and being possessed and control in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons too. Oh, that's kind of the problem of Sauron in Lord of the Rings. That you put on the ring too long, you start to just become, one of the ring race, but also you become him, this evil thing.
Yeah, it takes over you, and then you have a lust for power.
See, people possessed by the shadow in Stranger Things, they seem to be somehow connected to the gate opening up and the shadow perpetuating itself. So that seems to be like what the Thing was up to, because in the Thing, what's horrible about the Thing and the Thing is the alien is an alien from an outer space who is in a flying saucer, and we do not know what the thing's original form is. We see a flying saucer, it lands. We don't know. Was it that they walked inside and there was this goo and everybody got like infected by the goo? Did they walk inside and there was a being that looked like nothing and then infected them? Was it a big freaky monster with like arms and legs? But it's in a flying saucer. Later, it attempts to make a flying saucer. Now, this is your clue that the thing not only was in that flying saucer because its species created a flying saucer, but it knows how to make a flying saucer. Now, this tells you something that could be rather dreadful. On the planet where the thing comes from is completely consumed by the thing. It consumed the entire fucking planet. Everything is the thing now, and there's only one logical thing for the thing to do. Go to the flying saucers and send flying saucers of itself out there. But that means somewhere there's an entire planet where it's nothing but the thing.
I mean, this is essentially what the Shadow's doing with the bridge.
That, and in A Wrinkle in Time, the main villain is a entity kind of like it that controls an entire planet of people who are all mind controlled to be that way. A Tesseract is kind of like when you image things where in Back to the Future, he goes back in time, and because he goes back in time, he alters time by keeping the scientist alive, Doc. Well, the thing is, once you go back in time and you know how time is, that's a Tesseract. You are aware of how everything should be. And so you're going back in time, now you're in a Tesseract. Well, that's how it is when you write a story. A person who's ever written a story or written a script, when you go back and edit it and skip it and change it, it's very similar to what the Duffer brothers did when they created Henry Creel, or what a dungeon master does when it conjures a villain for you. You write a book called Milty's World. You bring it to Hollywood, and they go, Milty, this is cool, but you don't have a villain. And you go, oh, well, there are these people that bother me. They go, no, we need a villain. And you go, well, I guess you could. And they go, well, tell you what. And then they conjure a villain and plant it in your script. That's Henry Creel. Then, when you go back over this script called Milty's World and start to change things or add things, now you're the Tesseract. Because you're going back into this story you made of yourself, and then you're modifying it. You're changing it. And it's weird how in Hollywood, especially with stand-up comedy, it's very common for people to take revenge on their enemies by creating an image of that person, putting them into the narrative of the show, and then include little clues so that person knows that that's them. It's like in Austin Powers, a lot of people don't know that the Dr. Evil character was based on Lorne Michaels. Now, this is what comedians in Hollywood or writers in Hollywood want to do. They create a character called Milty, and it's a lot like you, but it's horrible. There's traits of you that you don't like, and they're taking things that you know happened between them and you, and they're making it even worse. And then pretty soon they defile and destroy this image of Milty until they are a laughingstock, hopefully with some sort of buzzword. And then when people ever make fun of this character, you know they're making fun of you. But if you ever say, that's me, they go, no, you're being arrogant. It's based on somebody else. That trick has been around forever in Hollywood. But a lot of people who, like Stephen King, when he writes his villains in his books, I know he's writing about villains that really did that to him. And so he's kicking their fucking ass in his stories. And in Hollywood, you do that. You go, I had this boss or I had this professor who told me I would never make it. I'm going to take his catchphrase, take him. Then you hope that one day your boss is with a date. He's watching a movie. He goes, oh, my student wrote this. Oh, that's me, and I'm a big prick. And he goes, man, that's based on me. And then his date goes, you're being arrogant. You're being paranoid. And then the person's just miserable, And I wonder in Stranger Things if they do that a lot. If there's people they don't like and they just melt them. You know, Freddy in Nightmare on Elm Street is a very bizarre villain because Freddy doesn't exist.
This is true. Yeah, it's just a dream.
He's a dream. There is no real Freddy. We saw his body. His body animates, and then they dump holy water on it and burn it, which was dope, dude. I love that. Favorite movie. But Freddy, the real Freddy that's a problem and keeps persisting, is a dream. And in a new nightmare, Freddy is a horrible nightmare stuck in the actor who played him, to where the actor just does nothing but create works of art that have Freddy on it because he's still possessed by Freddy. So that Henry Creel character running around in dreams, it's kind of what happened in a new nightmare too, and in Nightmare on Elm Street, where this character was haunting everyone's dreams and changing reality to do them in, but also projecting illusions. Because in a Nightmare on Elm Street, he makes the characters he's going to kill see illusions before he kills them, because the characters are probably so exhausted that they're now starting to nod off and have daydreams. People who haven't slept in a while also will start seeing hallucinations. They see hallucinations, but it's literally their brain is starting to dream, like you said, while awake. And that's what the virus does. The shadow disease infects people, and then they project things. And the only thing I don't get is how the Demogorgon, again, I mean, I get it if you look at Henry Creel as being stuck in Eleven's mind when she killed him. But I also think that Eleven drove away the evil side of herself that the Shadow had made. They even call the thing the Shadow. You can't get more Union than that.
Well, brother.
Well, dude, you're cool.
I had fun hanging out.
Thank you for talking with me.
Everybody go check out jasontdavis.com and you can read all about this. And I have read some of these articles. They're fun to read and think about, and definitely some cool dots connected there.
Thank you, Milty.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. All right, folks. Milty don't quit, and you don't either.